Today I'll teach you everything you need to know for offensive and defensive micro, as well as plain and navy micro in HoI4, and I uploaded a save for you so you can also practice the micro here. And as always, feel free to use the chapters to skip ahead, because I will have to go into a couple of very basic concepts before we get into actual offensive and defensive micro here. Every unit in HoI4 has strength and organization. Strength is the orange bar and organization is the green bar. Strength represents how well your divisions are equipped, so if they have less manpower or less equipment, they will have less strength, and by having less equipment, all of their stats will lower accordingly. And the green bar is organization. As long as this unit has organization, it will fight to its fullest extent. So even if it has 2 organization, it will still fight. Once it has 0, it will retreat, and I mean, you lose organization by taking damage and moving around. If you use strategic redeployment, which is B, to move them quicker, they will pretty much get to 0 org. They go down to 10% of their org, and yeah, I mean... this thing is not gonna fight anymore. And then we also have entrenchment, which isn't important for microing, and of course the planning bonus, which is this bar here, which accrues as soon as you are on a tile next to a front line that your divisions could join. And this is important. If we take a look at our tanks, these are not assigned to the front right now, but if I move them over to the front, we can see that they are getting a ticking planning bonus, even though they are not assigned. I've already shown strategic redeployment, which can be done by clicking B, and then they will use the quickest way to get to a certain location, which is they use railways. You can also click this button here, but honestly, just press B. I mean, your left hand is already there anyway for pressing space, so you might as well use shortcuts, which is something very important for a lot of microing. Like, it's just efficient to use shortcuts. If we send our division somewhere, for example to Schrötersburg, and then I press strategic redeployment, it will change its trajectory. It will change its path, which we might not want. Let's say the Soviets were taking this tile, and we know we would lose this tile. By pressing B, we immediately send our guy into this tile that we could not take. If I were to send him around and then press Control B, he would still use strategic redeployment to move there, but he will keep his path, which means we can play around the AI intercepting our divisions. One thing you can do, if you have a weird number of divisions, instead of selecting this and then selecting 17 here and then doing math, what you can do is you just make N generals consisting of 1 division. Let's just say this guy only had 115, so we had a nice clean stack of 120 divisions. What you can do is you can unassign all selected units from this army so that they are, well, unassigned, and we could even select them like this, and then we right-click the field marshal, and boom, look at that! They're all spread out very evenly, which, if you are playing the Soviet Union, kinda handy in the beginning of the game, or, you know, if you just deploy 120 divisions, you don't have to fiddle around and split them up. You can just, you know, create 5 generals and everything just works. If you press Ctrl H, you can unassign the divisions from your current plan. So these 6 I selected, they are no longer on this front line. I don't know if there's any way to select these divisions. I haven't found a way anyway. But what you can do is you can right click a front, and now we selected all divisions that are assigned to this front. As you can see, we don't have any of these 6 infantry that we unassigned here, and we also don't have the tanks because the tanks are not on this front right now. And then what you can do is you can shift click a general, and you will select the inverse of what you've selected. With this, we have selected our 18. If I shift left click him, we have our 6 divisions that we have not selected. So once again, I'm gonna control right click this, and then I can shift left click all of these and this one, and now I have selected all of these 6 unassigned divisions. I don't know if there's any way to make this simpler. If you know a way, you know a way you can annoy me. Another neat thing you can do, if you were to draw a front line, you would just click it usually, which gives you all of these very weird, you know, because every general now has his own designated area. But what you can do instead is you can shift left click, and now you have a front line under the field marshal himself, which is just much smoother, because now if I select Witzleben, we can see all of his divisions are spread out relatively evenly across the front line. And this is mostly useful if you assign a new general, because, you know, with the old system, if I were to add a new general to the front line, all of our units from this pocket would spread out. out, and we would have to wait until the general gets assigned to this front. And also there's no downside to assigning units to a general and a field marshal, so long as you don't overstack them, because now every unit that you put over his limit, he loses, I think it was 4% efficiency, 4% stats. Yeah, there we go, 4.1% even. So long as you don't overstack them, that's fine. If you do overstack them, then they will slowly start working towards skilled staffer, which can be handy. Technically, the only downside of using field marshal front lines is you are not gonna get organizer experience. This does say you get experience while using battle plans, but this is only for general battle plans. So what you can do is, if I want Manstein to get organizer XP, I can draw a front line here, and boom. Technically, suddenly we are using a battle plan front line. This will actually give him organizer XP even if we use the field marshal front line, which is a bit of a weird... It's Hearts of Iron 4. And of course, another downside is if you are grinding for specific traits. So let's say I wanted Witzleben to be a tank general in this game. You know, assigning infantry to him obviously means he's not gonna get Panzer Leader. And for each trait that your generals have completed, they will take less XP, or it will take longer to learn new traits. So you can learn all of these traits, earn all of these earned traits and these trained traits. And assigning traits does not change anything. So, you know, you can assign 5 traits to this general. He's still gonna have the same experience gain for the earned traits as if we had no assigned traits. But if he earns a trait, it's gonna take longer to get another earned trait. Which, if you want really specific and good generals, you should play a little bit around it, but it's not super important. Let's get into the microing part of the video. Did you see what I did there? I microed! Genuinely, that is microing in Hearts of Iron 4. You right click, and since I still have a little bit of time, I can actually explain you a little bit what you want to do when microing. So the most important part of microing in Hearts of Iron 4 is the terrain map mode, which I feel like used to look different. Maybe it's just a mod. Maybe I think it was probably just a map mod. That doesn't work. Anyway, usually with terrains, you would see terrains that you want to avoid. Since we are microing with our tanks, what we want to avoid are pieces like the Bessarabian... Actually, that's just hills. I guess the Caucasian mountains, Czechoslovakia, the Sudeten mountains and such. You want to avoid mountains with your tanks because tanks are very poopy with mountains. Of course, river crossings are also pretty bad. You do get a nice little penalty from the river crossing here as well. You, in general, want to avoid using tanks across rivers and mountains. If you do want to push there, what you can do is you can just create mountaineers or marines, or you can just ignore it because it's the AI and the AI is stupid. But we're here to micro. You should not push there unless the enemy is very weak. Let's say we had this tile and there was one division here, then I might as well push over here because I know the Soviets are very weak in this tile. And if we then right click here, we can just make the encirclement. The movement that I just did there, I used shift to chain up commands, which is very similar to RTS games if you've played those before. A lot of these shortcuts are similar to RTS games, but we're gonna get into shortcuts in a minute. You only want to push there if you know that you can easily push them. This is a bit weird because it's, you know, it's a little bit feeling based. It's a little bit vibe based. It's vibe warfare. Honestly, for this, you just have to get a feeling where you can push and where you can't push. If you want to, you can just avoid mountains. But one nice thing about mountains and rivers is if you do push over there, it is very easy for you to hold here. So if I want to just secure the river line here, then the Soviets will have a much harder time pushing us over in Latvia here. And that makes a very good defensive line, which I feel like somebody should write a book about this. Holy shit, I gotta tell the internet about this. For this, either fall back before you start the war or use it during the war to also drain the enemy advantage a little bit more. As for your targets for actual pushing, apart from the terrain, the biggest benefactors are, of course, supply hubs. Then railways, if you can cut off the supply hubs. So let's say we were in front of Zhytomyr. I know that I can't push in here. What I can do is push, let's say, from up here into the railway, and then this supply hub is no longer connected and it only uses local supply instead of supply from capital. And of course, you know, by taking the supply hub, you get it. So it is a double whammy. You take a supply from the enemy and you get your own supply, which especially once we get into the Ural region will be very handy. Another good target are VPs, because you get factories, you get manpower, you get resources, and you also take these from the enemy. And of course, you know, if it isn't the Soviets, then by taking VPs, like if you take Budapest, Győr, and I think Pex, you can take Hungary out, but you can also just take all of this and take Hungary out. Like, if you snipe VPs, the war is gonna be over quicker. Shocker, I know. Somebody should have told you that 4,000 hours ago, but here I am. Ports are obviously similar to supply hubs. The supply hubs of the sea. Cut them off as soon as you can, just so you get supply, and, you know, the enemies also can't flee anymore, which is very nice. If you make a pocket and they have a port, they will most likely try to flee, but if you take the port, then they are stuck, they are pocketed. Another thing that you can do is you can encircle a port. So if you take these 4 tiles and you deploy divisions there and the AI controls this port, the AI will constantly try to send divisions in here to widen the advantage, but if you simply kill the AI off, yeah, you can very easily cheese the AI. I wouldn't really recommend this because you're not really learning anything from this, but it is handy if you are in a very unsavable situation and, you know, you already spent 15 hours conquering the world as India and you kind of want this game to end at some point. Ah! Shit. Oh, German water is toxic. Yeah. The AI is not the smartest tool in the kitchen. Neither am I, apparently. Taking air bases is also another nice goal, because once again, you deny the enemy airbase and you get airbase. And this is very useful if this is the last airbase close to this region. Not only do you take an airbase, you genuinely put the enemy's air control in this zone to 0. Let's say this was the only air tile that the Soviets had. If I just push into here, boom. Now the Soviets can't set any planes here anymore, and we've won the air warfare, even if you don't take the last airport, because especially once again in the Urals, China and Africa and South America, the air zones are very weird. So even if the enemy still has airplanes in here, maybe this is the closest air zone, and sure, they're still gonna fly over eastern Poland, but it is very inefficient. The more of the air zone that this circle covers, the more efficient your airplanes will be. So let's say this is only 10% of the air zone of eastern Poland. Our planes are 10% efficient. If I send them over here, now we have 90% efficiency. And if I could cover this, our planes would have 100% efficiency. This is so useful. If you can snipe the capital, if you control Moscow, but not anything else of the state, you will have enough VPs, so the state flips to you. So even though you just control this tiny little speck on the map, suddenly the Soviets lose 20 factories and you get 10 from occupation, plus the resources, plus the manpower, which makes this a very sad boy. And then, of course, with supply hubs, if you do take supply hubs and you create railways, the railways are not actually going to do anything. The railways only increase the throughput of your supply hubs. I can build level 5 railways on this front line. It's gonna do jack shit unless we take another supply hub or we build a supply hub here. This, what I just built here, doesn't do anything. What you gotta do is you gotta either take a supply hub or connect the railways to a supply hub in order to benefit from this. That honestly explains why supply hubs are such a crucial part of warfare in HoI4 nowadays. If you don't have the supply hub, these guys are gonna have a little red icon next to them, and then they are not gonna be very happy and not gonna be fighty. As for the main tip for how to start an offensive or where to start, it's honestly just get a feel for it. This is one of those things where I can't really give you a precise answer, you know. Sure, look for weak points in the front line, which would be here. These guys are affected by attrition. These guys are fighting us right now. These guys are low on org. Over here is a very big chunk of the Soviets. If we want to encircle this chunk, if we were to push over here is relatively weak. We could push over here and then encircle them this way. Over here, they are a little bit more chunky. It doesn't really matter with our tanks because the tanks are still going to be good enough. But, you know, it's going to be a little bit hard to break. As for a demonstration, I guess what I'm gonna do is we can make a very small pocket, which is unusual for me. I am gonna assume these guys are gonna suffer from supply issues. And one thing I just did here, I pressed tab. This cycles through any possible target. wherever you can assign the arrow. So we cycle through General, Field Marshal, and then we have this offensive. Once this offensive were to complete, this offensive would start, the one that we're drawing right now, and then we can cycle. Now it would do the same thing for this offensive. And I'm even gonna be very cool about it. I'm not gonna use any planes here. Ooh, one thing I can show, we would lose this battle. Generally doesn't matter too much whether this bubble is red or green. What matters is how long this battle will continue. We can see this battle will continue for another 2 days, which makes sense because this guy is very low on orc. This guy is not so low on orc, so we're just gonna cycle a couple more divisions in here. So we could hold. I'm also fine with losing this tile, especially because we will encircle these tanks in a minute. But we would shuffle a couple of divisions out. And there we go. Now this guy is in reserve, which means he can join the battle. He's not yet in the battle, but he can join the battle. Let's say this guy has 10% orc. He's not gonna re-orc while in reserve because these divisions don't know. They could join the battle at any moment, so they can't really chill. If this guy had 10% orc, I would select divisions and then I would left click this guy and then I could right click him out to get him out of the battle. We can also do the same thing here because this guy is very low on orc. We're just gonna do this. This probably was, there we go, now he's joined the battle. And this is the gist of defensive microing. You just take a look when your fronts will fall and then you shuffle divisions in and out. The out is very important for defensive microing. I played Sheep's Mod as Poland the other day and the Soviets were constantly battle planning with mass assault, and there it was super important to shuffle divisions around because while we would hold and win battles, our divisions would keep on taking chip orc damage and never get a chance to reorg. If I did not shuffle divisions around, the Soviets would eventually push us out, and having reserves is super important here. In this instance, while we can hold with 3 divisions, I can use a 4th division in the back to cycle this one in and then one of the damage divisions out, allowing us to stay in the battle for as long as we need. The downside is we deal a little bit less damage because the 4th division is not fighting actively, but between dealing 1% more damage or surviving, I'll take surviving. Another thing that you can do, we can see these guys are currently in battle. If I were to attack them, suddenly these are in multiple combats. This is super bad. Suddenly they have minus 50% breakthrough and attack, which means these guys are much better at holding. This is also useful because now that these are very bad at attacking, suddenly these guys have a much higher chance of winning the battle, which means, you know, if I were to put my tanks here, it will be much easier to break them now. But we're just gonna do a little bit of microing here, shall we? Ideally, I would attack from 2 provinces, but we can't really here. I could probably attack over here, but that would be a river crossing. Usually you should also make a bit of a bigger front line unless you know you can hold it. And most important, with our tanks, we need divisions that will hold for our tanks. So if I want to send them over to Riga or Jelgava, it matters not if I just right click them over here. Sure, they're gonna break through there and get there, but the Soviets will just encircle them. So what you can do is you can just right click them over here and then you shift click them and then you do this and then you shift click them here and then you shift click them here. And now we have a couple of tanks that will hold, or we just have divisions like these infantry that will also just hold the front line. Like that's honestly the main reason why you want these infantry here, just to hold the front line. Do this. With this we are attacking from 2 sides. I assume we are gonna break through here, and over here we should also break. I'm just gonna send a couple of divisions in here because this is the only tile that I have not protected. If I were to see that these Soviets would move in here, I would also pin against the player. These tanks would probably be dead because they would start pinning here, they would start pinning here, they would start pinning here, and then they would send divisions in, and yeah, these tanks are dead. But this is fine because this is against the eye, so we're just gonna send our tanks across here. And this is a little bit annoying now because I haven't prepared any reinforcement divisions, and we are also running out of supply here. But if I had a couple more infantry that could reinforce here, we could also push a little bit more aggressively. If I was unsure of quickly taking this, what I can also do is I can create railways, and ideally I also create railways like this, because now the railways are built at the same time. And if I were to do this, the AI would lay this railway and then this railway and then this railway and then this way. But with this we build all the railways at once because we have enough factories. If you are worse, you can also go down to 2 speed or 3 speed, but honestly, just play 5 speed. You shouldn't, because it is very likely that you make mistakes, but honestly, I can't. I can't play on anything below 5 speed. I'm gonna be real here. If you keep on spending more than 5 hours on this Hearthstone game, I genuinely won't be able to help you. It's called Heart of Iron. And then we also do another support attack here. If I want to support from another angle and I don't want my divisions to move there, what I can do is I can control right click the bubble and then he's gonna support attack in the battle, but he's not gonna move. One thing that we are also gonna do, we can see this guy will arrive in 8 hours. So we're just gonna pin here. I'm gonna send one more tank over here to just cap this thing. Sometimes when you're in battle, you can't move your divisions. We know that we are being pinned. We cannot move to any of these tiles. What we can do is we can move to a tile that is not adjacent. We can't right click this tile, but we can right click past that tile, which, you know, if we want to attack while we're defending, very useful. So we're just gonna clean up the pocket here. We can see that we will lose this fight. That's fine. This battle we will win eventually, but there's already a light tank in here, whereas over here is just infantry. So I'm just gonna attack over here instead, and I'm also gonna attack over here. Now this tank is gonna be very inefficient, but it increases the combat width in this tile because we're attacking from another angle. So I'm just gonna do this just to break this as easily as we can. And there we go. We have pocketed a majority of the... Actually... I accidentally pocketed this part of the Soviet army as well, but we've pocketed a big chunk of the Soviet tank offensive. And that is microing in Hearts of Iron 4. We are currently battling here, and we will eventually lose this. We are gonna unassign all of these 11 tanks. So now we have just this guy under Manstein. We do last stand for 5 command power. And if you want to be even cheesier, you could also make 1 battalion division and then just use this one. So it costs you like 2 command power for last standing or using force attack. Now this guy has force attack. We send our 11 tanks over here and suddenly our 12 tanks have force attack for the price of 1 force attack. This is also what you should do defensively. You use force attack because you get more offense. You get the same organization damage taken thing. With this pocket, what you can do is you can just send your infantry in here. That's perfectly fine because these guys are out of orc. They are low on supplies, so it is very easy to break them. You don't actually need to use your tanks to clean up those pockets. You would slowly constrict them and take their breath away. Eventually, you can just close this pocket. A very small Soviet pocket here. And I genuinely mean small because I think the biggest thing I've done is encircle 200 German troops in the Urals as the US, which was like a third of Hitler's army, which... Imagine you had to say this to Hitler. Mein Führer, we lost about 200 divisions in Stalingrad. They were all encircled. Another thing that you can pay attention to is weather. I usually just ignore it, but, you know, snow in the winter months and then mud in the spring months. When you fight in the Soviet Union, sure, I don't care. I don't fight there. If you're struggling, that could be one reason. And if you aren't as optimized with your microing and your division designs, then sure, wait until summer and then push again, try again. Oh, look at that! We actually got encircled. Yeah, I don't really care. Let's say this tile, there were no Soviets in this tile. It was a neutral. I can see this Soviet guy is moving and he will arrive in 6 hours by hovering over him. And this is the only guy that's close to here that would move in here. And I can see my tanks would take 10 hours. So what I would do is I just pin here, do a little bit of support attacking. There we go. We can see 17 hours, 9 hours. And there we go. Via pinning, we saved our divisions. Wow. Amazing. We are truly a Hearts of Iron. Pinning is super important because, as you can see, I just saved divisions. I could secure a pocket. I could secure VPs. Technically, this is also pinning by doing a disruption attack here as well. Now, these enemy divisions are gonna de-orc super quickly. With this, I can also attack later on. So you can attack from multiple tiles. Even though the enemy tried to break through from one tile, you can use multiple other tiles to do a counter-offensive. Or also just to keep this tile relatively healthy. Offense is also a defense. But yeah, like seeing when a division will arrive here is just the most important type of pinning. Lightning round for offensive tricks. If we were to attack in a tile, let's say I attack this tank and then I click another division in, this division will not immediately join. Every reinforced tick, they have a chance to join this battle until they do join. But what you can do instead, you can stop this attack and you can just right click them at the same time, and now all of them are in the battle at once. If you end the battle, you get a little bit of orc back, but honestly the main benefit is if you have multiple units in reserves, you can just stop the battle and bam! Everybody is immediately here, which is super nice. And then you've seen this multiple times. By pressing H, you can stop a movement order. Encirclement penalties only apply if these divisions are only on one tile and there are no neighboring provinces that they theoretically could join. This does mean if we encircle Bulgaria over here, they could still technically get supply from Greece, even if they don't have supply from Greece. So long as Greece is neutral, these divisions will not count as encircled. You would have to take, you know, the Greek stuff or get Greek into the war against Bulgaria. So you're not gonna get the encirclement penalty. Another thing is, you know, if you overstack, for one, you're gonna take supply problems, but also we are gonna get the exceeding combat width malice, which is also pretty bad because, you know, less stats. So try not to go over the combat width and overstack your divisions too much. Another neat little thing, which I don't use that often, is you can use control groups. By using control and a number, we can control 1. Let's say this guy is control 2. And there we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 1. There we go. Wow. Cool. It's nice that they exist. And as I've mentioned before, shift clicking is also just super important or super useful to queue up orders. By right clicking the trash icon, the delete order icon, you delete all orders, all existing orders, which is useful for, let's say, our Mannstein here. We have 5 different front lines for our general. There we go. Now we have 0. S selects half of your current divisions. G can be used to consolidate divisions, turns them into as close to full strength as possible. Not super important in Hearts of Iron 4. Useful for the Anschluss thing for Germany because you need fully equipped divisions, or also if you are very low on manpower and equipment and, you know, you want to, well, consolidate divisions. Another thing that you likely will never need is encircling divisions in neutral territory. Let's say this was a British division and the General Government was giving mill access to the British. What I can do is, of course, you know, I can right-click this division, but that's very inefficient. Instead, what I can do is encircle this division, and then by right-clicking it, or by attacking it, pushing it out, it doesn't have any other area that it can go to, and it would just pop. Again, this is some super niche stuff that you are likely never going to need, but hey, if I can spare one person the headache of playing Orsa again, then mentioning this has been worth it. Of course, by selecting frontline and then right-clicking on the edge of a frontline, you can edit it. Conversely, if you shift right-click, you can also make a small frontline on a new frontline. Similarly, if you have an arrow, you can edit this by using the edit mode, and then, you know, you can drag it around. If I wanted to push into Smolensk, although at this point you should also just micro yourself, but if I wanted to push into Smolensk, I could do this with the edit arrow menu. While I'm here, I might as well explain a couple of tricks for naval invasions. What you can do is you can prepare N naval invasions, and these will all fire in 7 days instead of making one naval invasion with 3 guys here. This one would take us 21 days to prepare, which means, you know, within 7 days you can send 100 divisions. This will be fixed in the next DLC, but until then, feel free to abuse this, I suppose. Another thing that you can do, if you are at war with somebody, this is gonna be a bit scuffed to explain here. Germany and Turkey are both at war with Japan, but we are at war with the Soviet Union. What we can do, we can use support from Turkey in order to invade the Soviet Union because we have mill access, and technically we could use this mill access to invade Japan, but this is not Japan. I'm not sure how good you are at geography, but with this we can actually land in the Soviet Union, even though we shouldn't be allowed to jump off of Turkey. Defensive micro is not something that you will need in every game. Like, you're not gonna need it in like 90% of your games, but if you do need it, it will genuinely save your ass, your game. To practice it, what you can do is just start as Ethiopia in the 1936 scenario and try to defend against Italy. You don't have to win. You don't even have to hold out for long. Just get a feel for it. Cycle divisions in and out. Do the thing that I said earlier with the orc shuffling. And if you want to, you can also buff yourself a little bit. Give yourself more equipment. Cheat yourself some manpower in. You know, like, the main goal is just get a feel for holding, and then you can make it a little bit more difficult and difficult and difficult. Once you can hold, once you can defensive shuffle, there's nothing holding you back anymore. The entire game is your oyster at that point. I don't know why it's an oyster, but you can fuck it if you want to. Again, the most important thing is the bubbles are a trap. Just take a look at your divisions. Have they orc? How do the divisions look in the reserves? Do they have orc? If they don't have orc, send them out. Just keep on shuffling them around. And for problematic provinces, you would also keep divisions. If I knew the Soviets are very aggressive and pushing through Minsk, then I just keep a couple of divisions back here and I can shuffle these out. And if they are, there we go, this guy. Oh, look at that. Super low on strength. And then, you know, we shuffle this guy out and we shuffle this guy in, and voila, we've won. As for microing airplanes, there's not too much to do here. Just make sure that you have the oil and your air bases are not overstacked, because as soon as these are overstacked, their efficiency is gonna be dog shit. And then you also just want to make sure that you cover as much of the air region as possible. It doesn't matter if this plane is close to the front that I want to support. Let's say I want to support up here. Doesn't fucking matter if it's down here or here, so long as it covers as much of the Eastern Poland air zone that I want to support. You know, if I want to support this battle, then I just want to make sure that I cover as much of the air zone as possible. It doesn't matter where my plane is at the point, just that it covers as much as possible. Microing ships is also relatively simple. We just select our admiral and then we control right click them. Then we can move them to a different naval base. If we select a task force and we right click them, we can move them into a sea tile. And this can be very helpful if you're trying to hunt a specific navy with a very slow navy, because then you can put your slow navy in the North Sea and then you have a patrolling navy that's just around here. Let's say over here was a battle. We can see the battle popping up here. What I can do is I can just right click the ship in here and it will join this battle. That is Navy Micro.
And in this video, Rita will teach you when you should build infrastructure.